Transportrevolusjonen her. Vi utforsker den videre. Til å lede samtalen, ønsk velkommen Zeros egen Kari Asheim.
As we've heard, we're entering a new era of EV development, where electric vehicles within a decade will dominate the car industry and have a massive impact on the oil industry. We will explore this subject further. Please welcome Mr. Nikolai Astrup, Dr. Karl-Thomas Neuman, and Mr. Colin Mckerracher, and give them a warm applause. A warm welcome to you, all of you. I will start with you, Mr. Nikolai Astrup. You represent the Conservative Party, which holds leadership of the Norwegian government, and you are also leading the Transport Committee in Parliament. And of course, you drive a fully electric car yourself. So what is your ambition when it comes to the impact of the Norwegian EV policy?
Well, let me first say that I was supposed to be in a meeting in Parliament now, and I told my boss I was coming here and meeting you, and he said, please tell him that I want a new car as fast as possible. So I think he would appreciate to be put on the list. Well, I mean, Norway is the fastest country, the country that has the fastest uptake of electric vehicles, and our path is towards no fossil fuel cars sold in the year 2025. I think we're going to, some people said that would be ambitious. I don't think so. Because what we're seeing now is that the new models are coming, like Opel's new car. And it's going to be the first of a series of cars which will cover all needs of different families and businesses. And I think the uptake will really be at a much faster pace as we go along. So now it's not the... I mean, we can't really make it more beneficial to buy electric cars in Norway. I think that's difficult. It's probably the country in the world where it's the most beneficial to buy electric cars. So when the models come, I am confident that the development is going to be extremely fast, and we will reach our goal of no new fossil fuel cars sold in 2025. My vision is a transportation sector, not only cars, with no emissions. We need to get there as quickly as possible. And I think the positive thing is that what we're doing on electric vehicles is spreading. Other sectors in Norway are being inspired. And we're seeing it especially in the maritime sector, where Norway already is a leading country. We have car ferries going fully electric. And they do it not only because it's good for the environment. I think this is a crucial point. We don't have enough idealists in the world for that to save us alone. It needs to be better and cheaper. And that's where we're heading. And the new battery electric car ferry has running costs which are 80% lower than its diesel equivalent. And that shows us how beneficial this can be, not only for our emissions, but also for our economy. And if we can go green by black numbers, then we will succeed. Not only in Norway, but also in the world.
You make it sound like this will develop all by itself, but it won't. What is important? What measures are important forward?
Definitely, it won't develop by itself, and I think we have done a lot of the right things. We are stimulating electric car sales. We're stimulating companies to move to electric trucks, also hydrogen trucks. We're looking at, our buses in, for instance, this city will now run more and more electric. They have some hydrogen buses. They have bioethanol buses. We're trying numerous technologies, which is really good. So, and we need to have support schemes to get technologies running. And the last year, we've spent 800 million kroners on climate measures in the transportation sector. That is an amazing increase, and which also shows an interest in among businesses and the private sector and public sector in Norway to take up environmental friendly solutions and electric solutions in particular. So this is the future, I agree. The future is definitely electric.
Dr. Karl-Thomas Neuman, we are delighted to have you here, and we are very excited about your new long-range EV, the Opel Ampera E, launched in Norway today at this very conference. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What are your ambitions with the Opel Ampera E?
Well, for us, it's a very important car because it wasn't easy to come to the conclusion to say the electric car is the future, because you must consider our entire industry is invested into combustion engines. We are spending money every day to reinvent the combustion engine and make it cleaner and better. But I think we started understanding in the last years, and we looked at Norway, obviously, as one example, and we rubbed our eyes and we said, this can't be true, and they are totally crazy, this will not work. But I think you convinced us, and you convinced, and other developments in the world, like, for example, the CO2 legislation, which makes combustion engines very expensive, so that we wanted to change the path. And the path so far was, okay, we do electric cars to create compliance, to do enough for California or to do some for Europe to fulfill the 95 grams. But with this car, we really said we want to do something. What do we need to do so that people will really love the car and they can use it every day? And we thought the biggest problem is the range. So we said what was impossible 5 years ago. We set the target of then 400 kilometers. Now in the meantime, it's 500. So it's a fantastic. For us, it's a very important offer to transform the brand, and I must say I'm overwhelmed about the reaction here. Everyone wants to have a car first. That's just fantastic, and that shows, while we have a hard time selling our combustion engine cars often, because there's a lot of competition and they get very expensive, and this car is really a car which people will pull off us, and we will have trouble to build enough of them. Okay,
so now looking beyond the Ampera E, what's next from Opel when it comes to electric cars?
Well, obviously that is only the start. It's that base technology where the cell technology is very important, and we worked with LG Chem to make it, I think it's a benchmark technology we have there. We want to develop this further, and obviously are we spinning out a whole family of cars from here. But we also believe what I've said in the talk, this whole aspect of sharing, because you are perfectly right, when you use the car, even today, if you drive your electric car all day, and with an Ampera E you can now do this because you have the reach, it will be cheaper in your total cost of ownership than an Opel Astra diesel would be. So already, but if you only use it to drive 20 kilometers to work and 20 back, then that will take a longer while. So we think this whole sharing, that will allow and that it will enable a much wider distribution of electric cars, and that's what we are working on.
Mr. Colin Mckerracher, we've just heard you describe how EVs would cause the next oil crisis, and that is based on forecasts showing that electric vehicles might be competitive as early as in 2022. Now, what are the most determining uncertainties that could either halt or speed up the development?
Sure, and I'll just clarify that is on a total cost of ownership basis, not an upfront basis. That's a bit further out. And actually, I want to say also, being in Norway, how much the Norwegian example matters for the rest of the world. I spend a lot of time with different governments around the world talking about sort of what's possible. And I think the Norwegian example also has shown that some of the barriers people throw up and say that can't happen because of charging times or because of range anxiety or whatever else, they're not as big barriers as the economics. Because what Norway's done is made the economics competitive, as you said, generally the most generous. But when those economics are competitive, people buy them. People buy them in large volumes. So those other arguments are not as strong as people make them out to be. But in terms of the barriers as to whether we get to that cost competitiveness or not, there's a couple that I can think of. One of them is that a lot of the volume is still driven by fuel economy regulations. So the reason a lot of the automakers are making big investments is because it is really hard to meet those fuel economy regulations without significant degrees of electrification. If that changes, for example, in the US under President Trump, it looks like the corporate average fuel economy regulations will probably be relaxed, is our current estimate. That reduces the incentive for automakers to have to make very significant investments. Now, many of them will do it anyway because they see a future in this, but the immediacy maybe and the timeline shifts. And the second one is on the battery technology side, and that's whether we hit a material cost wall in those battery cost declines. So can the battery costs keep coming down, or do we eventually hit a wall in terms of the cost of cobalt, the cost of lithium, the cost of manganese? Our view is that we don't. Humans, again, are very good at carving costs out of things that we make a lot of. We're fairly optimistic that there's a long way to run still in terms of cost reductions. But I'd probably flag those two as the biggest uncertainties as to how soon we get to those sort of cost parity points, whether they're on a total cost of ownership basis or an upfront basis.
Dr. Neuman, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think very much right. I'd like to add a point, which is that really the cost of the conventional combustion engine is going up because of the CO2 requirements, exhaust requirements. So these are getting more expensive. And then another driving factor is truly the compliance. This 95 grams, which we have to achieve in 2020, are harder to achieve than we thought before, because we now have real driving emissions and we have WLTP and many other things. And that means we need more electric cars. And then it is becoming, of course, for us also important that we can reduce the cost of the electric car so much that we can actually make money with those, because we now need to sell them. And now I think it is overdue to turn this around and say, no, how can I sell enough and not lose money on it, but how can I sell much more and make a lot of money on those? We are not there yet, but I think if you look at, we have a potential in the batteries, it was mentioned. We have huge potential. The electric motors, if you put them here, they look pretty simple. They have a lot of raw material in it. They are expensive, but they are more expensive now than a combustion engine. That makes no sense. So, but we built, what, a few 100,000 of those in total in the industry, and 80 million of these. So they will count a learning path. The power electronics. So there's so many things which can still be improved, and now our focus has to be to re-steer resources from the combustion engine to the electric engine and the electric technology. That's what we do.
Mr. Astrup?
Well, I think what you mentioned about the Norwegian example being important. Of course, we buy a lot of cars, that's important, but also it's a chance for the world to see how all these things works together. The grid, the power supply, how many chargers do you need? How do people actually use these cars? Do they use them differently than they use their conventional cars? How will autonomous cars change the picture? The Norwegian government is planning to launch a bill on autonomous cars and pass it in Parliament, hopefully, before the summer. So we're trying to be first movers also on that, taking a lead ahead. And I think we're also working on smart metering and how does the electric car, how can that be a part of our grid system? These are all fantastic opportunities. And I think Norway has a small population with a big technology uptake, quick technology uptake. We can be that sort of technology hub and also, hopefully, create a lot of jobs in Norway from that. That's my ambition as well. Green jobs.
This conversation is getting close to the end, and I would like to ask you, Dr. Neuman, because I think the audience is very curious on how fast the car industry really is moving towards zero-emission cars. So when will Opel produce and sell only zero-emission cars?
Yeah, that is something I don't know yet, but we are working on that. I think it is important, you have put out the 25 date, German
2030,
Parliament 2030. We have to have such a goal as a company, but I can't tell you yet, we are working on it. For us, these things, there's lots of investment in the old technology and there's a lot of employment. And so normally the industry is moving slowly. Here now we have to accelerate much, because I think it's not a question whether you choose to do it or not. You have to do it because the old world is disappearing. But to do the transformation without like frightening everyone away and without neglecting the interest of all various stakeholders, we have to do it faster than we normally would. I
think we will have to end the conversation. I'm sorry, time is running out. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I think we can conclude that we are in the beginning of the electric revolution of transport. And I also think that it's clear that during these crucial years ahead of us, we will need more than ever dedicated politicians and industry. So thank you very much, and give the panel, please, one more big applause.